Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Write or Die Show. I'm your host, Randi-lee. On the show, we interview other writers and we talk about mental health from their personal journeys. If you have not already hit that like and subscribe button, go ahead, do that now so that you never miss an episode. Hi, everybody. So we have Hayden Knight with us today. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing good. I'm excited and nervous to be here.
Oh, no, but why? You've been here before.
That's the funny part. I feel like I was less nervous last
That's
time.
hilarious. So I was gonna say, and we kind of already did, if you have not already watched Hayden's other episode, go back, check it out. Because we're gonna talk about different stuff. So I mean it's
Yeah,
not
I think it's called like You Will Cry or something similarly aggressive.
yeah, I think so. I think we were pretty intense on that one.
Yeah, you're not gonna cry during the video. You're just gonna cry in general in life.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So and I just noticed actually your
Mhm.
tattoo.
Oh, I have
And
several.
I
I have
love it.
several. I have, oh God, I'm like, I think I only have oh God, three, right? Four. I have four because I also have this one.
Oh,
The little flash. I'm kidding. It's
yeah, yeah.
just my shoulder. I have four and I want more so bad, but they're expensive,
I
so it's a
know.
process.
Yeah. How many do I have? I have one, two, three, four. Oh, I have five now.
Ooh.
Yep, yep. I'm ahead of you.
Oh, I gotta
Because you know
catch up.
it's a
Because it's a
competition,
contest, right? It's a
right?
competition. Who
It
has the
totally is.
most?
Yeah, yeah. It's not, guys. We are totally lying. We are
Oh
not
yeah.
saying you have to go out and get them. Don't get us wrong.
Don't get them if you don't want them.
No, exactly.
Just like
Um,
really anything else. Don't do it if you
right? We're
don't
not
like
peer
it.
pressuring you. That's not a thing we're doing.
But if you want to do it, do it. Just, find a reputable place that's clean.
Yes, I was just thinking that. Yeah, yeah. Don't just go to somebody's basement, please.
No, stick and poke from like non-professionals is so dangerous. Oh my gosh. Anyway, I could
Yeah.
go on.
Yeah. So if you want a tattoo, go and get one at a reputable place and send us pictures. Yeah.
Yeah, honestly.
Let's yeah, do that.
Yeah.
All right. So Hayden is back on the show because
Oh my
she has another
gosh.
book coming out.
I have another book. It's coming October 24th.
And I'm so
It's
excited.
scary to say a date. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited.
Well, I'm excited. So if you guys haven't already read my review of the last one, which was Queen of Magic, right? Like
Mhm.
I'm
Yes.
I was like, wait, did I just say the wrong title?
That
So
would have been
the
funny, but no.
right.
You're right.
So Queen of Magic, it was actually one of
Mhm.
my favorite ones that I've read.
Oh my
Um
gosh.
because there was so much dialogue. I like books that have a lot of dialogue.
Yeah, I'm a big dialogue person.
Yes.
I It's funny cuz I have some friends who that's so rude. I'm so sorry. That's my alarm to say like you're late if you're not at the thing. So
It's true. We did start early, so I mean, I get it. I get
I'm so sorry.
it.
I should have turned it
Okay.
off. But I have some friends who, in the past, like during the pandemic, at one point, we were writing like fan fiction and stuff and sharing it with each other for some games that we were really into. And I don't usually write a lot of fan, I just don't. I think it's great. I read a lot of it. But it was very funny because I have some friends that are much more prosy and
Okay.
very like flowery, and it's all great. And then I come in and it's like dialogue and like it's
Yeah.
sometimes it's a challenge because I have to like really make sure I work on my descriptions and really work on making sure there's like plot.
Plot is
The
important, but
dialogue is there.
I like plot that's pushed along by dialogue. I
Hmm.
mean, obviously I do a lot of reviews and not to say that these books are bad, but
Hmm.
I don't enjoy them as much when it's so much description of things.
Oh my
I
gosh,
get
yeah,
bored. I can't see the picture in my head anyways. Like you're describing this thing I can't envision anyways. So
exactly.
let me see it the way I'm going to see it anyways, and
Exactly.
let's talk and move this along. So
Hmm.
that's my preference in a book.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Yeah,
like
I'm
and
not the most typical fantasy, especially like adult fantasy, like
yeah,
writer in that way. I like to joke that like I write fantasy without the bullshit.
I like that.
So I'm not going to tell you about some dead king from 100,000 years ago, whatever, for two
Yeah.
pages. Like, no,
Thank
that's not what I'm going to do.
goodness.
We're not going to talk about food. I don't care what they're eating. I don't
Right?
care about the sewage system.
Right?
Like,
I
I'm not going to
know.
do that to you.
Yeah. So I hate those books. I shouldn't say
Yeah.
hate. I shouldn't say hate.
It's a
They're
pet
not.
peeve. It like
Yeah.
really
Yeah. It's tedious to read, I think
it's
is what it is.
work.
It's tedious. Um, and so they usually lose a star right off the top because it's tedious to read.
Yeah, you're like if I feel like if you're reading a book and you feel like, "Oh, I have to keep going and this is hard."
Yes.
I mean, I know a lot of us are like, a lot of people who were big readers as kids grow up and we're kind of struggling to continue reading. But
True.
beyond that, like I think we know the difference when it's like literally kind of a chore, or you're kind
Hmm.
of having to force yourself through sections. That, in my opinion, is a sign of like weak writing.
Yes.
Sometimes it is preference. I think there is some of that
For
for
sure. Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
But in general, and then of course, also it's weak writing in my opinion because I like very dialogue focused, character driven
Yes.
narratives.
Exactly. Me too. But I've read quite a lot of books that have that beautiful balance of the two. I'm reading a
Yes.
book right now. What's it called? It is called Death's Intern. And it has,
Ooh.
yeah, and it has a nice balance. It's progressed along with the dialogue, but it throws in just enough description or just enough, they went from here to there and they saw
Yeah.
one, two, three things, just enough.
Hmm.
So that's a really good balance.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think it's I feel like it's very interesting because when I read older books, even books from like the 90s or the 80s, but especially when you read like for example, I've read the some of the classic Sherlock Holmes.
Oh,
That's a really good example. Where if you go back and you read any of that stuff, you see like how different our taste in literature was however many generations ago or even just a couple decades ago.
yeah.
Whereas nowadays we're a lot more fast paced. We're competing with a lot more, I think, in
Yeah,
general.
we definitely
Um,
are.
we really are, which I enjoy the fast paced element more, and I appreciate to some degree the challenge of like proving that like hey my work is like actually worth your time, like I'm not going to take your
Right.
time for granted as a
Exactly.
reader, like I'm going to respect that. But back in the day there was none of that, so all it was all just this very like just go on forever, not a lot actually happens and I'm not sure what they're telling me that does
Right.
happen. Like I don't know what's happening
Yeah.
here. So I think that's also a big thing too that really changes over time, these things that we see where there is shifts in preferences in the reader base on a whole, and
Yeah.
nowadays it's much more fast-paced oriented.
Yeah. My husband always jokes because TikTok has given him like the shortest attention span ever. He doesn't even like to sit through a 30-minute TV show. So,
Oh my
well,
gosh, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, you get so used to these. Are you serious?
Yeah,
It
you get
stopped
used to it.
itself. It knew. You get used to, yeah, and then you kind of
Right?
start expecting that from other things. And I think that can sometimes be dangerous. I'm actually not
Oh yeah.
actively on TikTok because it sucks up too much of my time. There's so
Oh
much
yeah.
good and like fun stuff that's on there, but like it will
But you
just,
get sucked in. You go in the
yeah.
TikTok hole and you're
Hmm.
gone. That's what we
Yeah,
always say to my
exactly.
husband. We're like, you're in a TikTok hole now. Like, come back to reality.
Yeah, leave the TikTok all. Maybe set a timer or something. If I get
Yeah.
TikTok again, that'd probably be what I do is like not let myself stay on it too long. Because then it stops being fun and then it feels like a weird trap. It's not
Right?
like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm having a great time for like an hour going through TikToks. It's like, no, I feel like I just can't stop. I can't like
Yeah.
break myself out
And
of
that's a
this.
problem. And that is a big
Yes.
problem. Yeah.
Task transitions, am I right?
Right? Ugh, yeah. All right. So we're gonna switch gears, kind of. I mean, we were sort of on the route of mental health with,
Yeah.
past transitions and, being addicted to social media in a sense. Um, but when you asked to come back on the show, which I was like, yes, the next book is out because like I said, I really enjoyed Queen of Magic. And I showed my kid the cover art for this one. He's like, that's so
Isn't it
cool.
so good?
It's so
Oh,
good. So good.
I got all of my covers done by the same designer. He's great. And I keep having to go back to him like every couple of like years or whatever to be like, okay, will you do the wrap now? Because I just got the covers originally.
Yeah.
Um, and they're beautiful, especially this one is my favorite.
Yeah,
They're
it's
all very beautiful, very similar style. This one's really blew me away.
yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. So, I mean, I have pretty high expectations now for the book. So, I'll
You
let you know.
should.
I'll let you know how that goes. But when you emailed, you said, "Hey, I would love to talk about how writing this book was a little bit." I don't think you used the word scary. I can't remember the word you used exactly, but I'm gonna paraphrase and say it was a little bit scary.
It was hard. I actually started working on the Queen of Magic series when I was a teenager. I wrote my first book as a teenager, a different book entirely that is not in print anymore for many, many reasons, but very grateful for the experience. Um, and I had pretty much written, like, completed like my first drafts by the time I was like attempting college. And around that time is when I started working on the earliest versions of the second book, which is now Queen of Madness. Um, and it's been a process. When I think about it that way, it's been almost 10 years to get from those really early stages to where I am now, figuring out like what's going to happen, who's involved, like all of it. Even more so, the first book went through a lot of changes from its earliest concept, but once it got past like the very early concept, and once the character, basically the character of the dealer, came into play,
Oh,
the
I like
story
him.
mostly shaped from there. He
Oh,
was kind
okay.
of the one that really actually made the narrative start to come together. I had a version of Solaire and a version of the human girl Adele that existed in very different forms. But then once he entered the picture, it really started to coalesce into something very similar to what it would become, which is why he starts out at least he starts out the first two books. He's the first person that we hear because he's the one that really pulled it together.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Crazy
okay.
little man.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm not saying he's great. I love him because I love my characters, but he's a mess. And we see that in Queen of Magic.
Yep.
But getting into Queen of Magic, first of all, it delves into a lot more personal struggles with mental illness in different ways. I have one particular character who is one of several point of view characters in the second book. We have like four. Three that we visit pretty regularly. One of those, of course, Solaire, and then we have a fourth one who we just visit a couple of times. And all of them deal to some degree with mental health, I think. Um, there's one that I could maybe argue doesn't have mental illness, bless her. Still, we're all going through it though, right? Like the world is ending. But the other three are dealing with it in a number of ways. We see people we see some of these point of view characters deal with different forms of abuse from different figures in their life. We see characters recovering from really traumatic events in forms of PTSD and CPTSD. I have a character that deals, the biggest mental health one, who deals with an intense amount of like self-loathing and depression and like previous encounters with, there's going to be a little bit of like trigger warning, I should say, just talking about some heavy things, but I'm not going to get into obviously any details.
Yeah.
But dealing with previous suicidal ideation and some self-harm instances, none of which is like actively depicted, but kind of moving through the process of like coping with all of
Okay.
this while there's so much going on externally.
And what made you give the characters those experiences?
That's, you know what, this is a great thing. This is a great segue because I honestly don't think I did. Not to get, weird for some people, I guess, but for me, writing is partially a spiritual experience in that there used to be a concept of the muse and the genius
Yes.
as something external to creators, right? The author of Eat, Pray, Love does a beautiful TED talk about this. And if anybody's like a real creative that like aligns at all with what I just said, check that out because the way she talks about it really changed the way can like conceptualize the idea of like inspiration in the muse, and in some ways it really validates my feelings about writing. So there comes a point when there's definitely a lot of things that I create and I make choices about, but for the most part I feel like these stories are things that I'm just unearthing that like exist. Maybe that's like an energy thing, maybe whatever, but these characters already existed in a sense. Like as I learn certain things about them, there's, for example, a character who deals in the past. It's never something I think I could explore, with some with some very unpleasant like sexual abuse, right?
Okay.
Very triggery. I would never go into it though because that's a trigger for me. Like I don't want to get into it. Like I
Hmm.
don't want to go there. And there were times that I was kind of like looking at this character like I don't want to include this at
Hmm.
all, even just referencing that this is a problem. But there was like a really horrible feeling around that of like, well, I'm leaving out something that is like really
Okay.
important to this character's whole vibe. Like it feels very disingenuous to leave it out.
So on that note,
Yeah.
when we're talking, my brain's trying to figure out how to make it make sense to everyone else, make sense to me.
Yeah.
So when we take that and look at real life people, right? Not the characters in the
Hmm.
book, it's it speaks volumes because a lot of times we don't want to deal with that stuff. We don't want to talk about that stuff that happened
Hmm.
whenever. And then it does feel disingenuous, like you said. Um, and that's why therapy exists. That's why um, journaling exists. All these different coping strategies to help deal with those past traumas, past abuses that have happened in a safe way. Um,
Hmm.
so that was just kind of, I wanted to tie that all in together because
Yeah.
it spoke volumes to me that, even these fictional characters, you're like, I can't leave this part out because that's part of who they are. Well, in real
Hmm.
life, if you're leaving out a part of who you are, you're always going to feel empty. And I can say that because I've
Hmm.
I've been there, done that, right? Where I tried to
Yeah.
just put it in a box, shut it away. I'm not going to look at it. And
Hmm.
you're just constantly living this life that's not yours.
It feels very detached. It just feels wrong. And that particular character, who that relates to, and then one other character who's dealt with some like more common, I guess, forms of sexual abuse, but still not okay, very much. The idea of leaving that out, it's almost like they were like, fuck you. I'm sorry, my life is upsetting to you. And I'm like, you're not real. But it feels very like, how could you do that? Like, I in the end see myself as like a medium through which these stories can be told, right?
And I think it's
Which,
nice. Sorry.
well, go for it.
I think it's nice because not everybody wants to read a nonfiction book,
Hmm.
right? Like, I'll admit my books are not for everybody because I'm writing nonfiction. I'm writing real life. This actually happened. And sometimes the people know me, or you get to feel like you know me because you've watched all my episodes. There's a lot of them,
Yeah.
right? So, like, it can be harder to read a nonfiction real life story about somebody who's gone through certain things.
Mhm.
Um, and God bless us nonfiction writers that do write it because it's valuable, it's needed, but it's not for
Mhm.
everyone to read. So when a fiction writer can put all of these stories into a character that doesn't exist, that you're not going to meet on the street or see on YouTube, even,
Exactly.
right? That does not exist other than in this book that you're imagining, it can be another way of coming to terms with your own trauma.
Exactly. I think fiction in all of its forms is a way for human beings to express and interpret reality. It both is a
Yeah.
result of our understanding of us trying to understand the world, and it
Mhm.
feeds our understanding of the world. So
Yes.
trying to hide just like across the board. Obviously, we're allowed to have our safe little happy pieces of
Oh,
fiction.
of
You're
course.
allowed to have your wholesome, the world is amazing pieces of
Yeah.
fiction. Those are amazing. But if we try to hide all like trauma, all mental illness, all of the bad shit from fiction entirely, I mean, we wouldn't like it, I think.
Right?
And it
Exactly.
would further isolate people who are dealing with those things. So showing it in fiction, it feels detached enough that we as like the audience can process our feelings about it in a way that feels
Yeah,
unobserved. Like somebody isn't telling me, "Hey, I went through this horrible thing as a kid," and I have to manage not only my own feelings but how I'm reacting so that I don't like, potentially upset them or make them feel whatever. Like I have to do a lot in that moment and that's really scary. But if I'm reading a
exactly.
book about the same shit, I can just deal with my feelings. I can have a period where I'm like, I don't care about this, or I can decide how I feel and it doesn't hurt anybody in that space. Um
Exactly.
until I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, I've dealt with my feelings. Now, if I encounter someone in real life who's dealt with it, or who's dealing with this, I can be a better like support, or I can be more understanding, or I can know, hey, I'm sorry, I can't talk about this with you. Like, that's not safe for me. Having
Exactly.
those, being able to process these like realities that sometimes maybe we haven't encountered, or maybe we have, but we just haven't processed through fiction, I think
Yeah.
is a very common thing that we do. And I think
Yep.
trying to avoid that, it's very disingenuous. So
Right.
yeah.
And I like how you said that you might come to somebody might be able to then understand someone else better because not
Hmm.
everybody's going to have gone through these things, which thank goodness for that, right?
Yes, thank goodness.
Right. But and you might, again, you might not want to read a real life story about it because that can be, I mean, I'll admit, I write nonfiction, but they're not my first choice when I go to pick a book,
No, oh my God, I
right?
could
Like
tell you.
it's
We could talk
not,
about how my writing is so much darker than what I like to read.
right? It's so funny that way. Um, but when you pick up a book that you are excited to read, whether it's a horror, a fantasy, sci-fi, whatever, a nonfiction, whatever,
Yeah, exactly.
you you can learn something from it. And this is the same thing that we do with kids from a very early age. We read them books with these completely fake stories. I mean, trains don't really talk, but Thomas teaches lessons,
Yeah, we
right?
learn from it.
It's the same thing with adults. We just don't tend to think about them in that way. But with kids'
Hmm.
books, we do. It's like, hey, what lesson are you going to learn in this book? And that's another reason I like when I write the kids' books. Not that I've written many, but I have a few, and they're fun to write because they're writing a lesson, but with a stuffed animal as the main character.
Hmm.
Obviously, you're a stuffed animal not coming to life, but
Yes.
you're learning to be brave. You're learning these different
Hmm.
skills. It's the
Yeah,
same
you're
thing with
finding
adults.
exactly. No, we
Yeah,
never really change. Our brains develop, and that's about it. Our brains
exactly.
feel more, but it doesn't mean we're not still kids at like the core of us. We're all the same in that sense. And yeah, we love stories. Are you kidding? Why, like talking about TikTok, when people do those story times, people love that shit. And it's like, because we love stories. That's how we
Right?
share these things, fiction and nonfiction. But of course, obviously, I focus on fiction because I'm a fiction writer. Um,
Exactly.
and fiction, it seems fake, but it is actually very real in terms of the messages we're expressing, the themes that we're dealing with, the emotions and experiences that these characters are having. Like, we're very closely tied.
Yeah.
Um, and talking about things that are like kind of triggering, I actually started using partly too because I was a little bit inspired by fan fiction. I'm not sure how in the fan fiction space you are, but they tag
Uh,
everything.
yeah,
Um,
I'm not big in it, but my kid is. My kid reads a lot of it.
Hell yeah. Well, then your kid knows they tag everything, right? Everything gets tagged. Whether it's totally safe for work stuff, they'll tag every character in it. They'll tag, like, people will go crazy, and some people will go a little simpler. Some people will go really crazy. And something that you can really appreciate about that is you know exactly what you're getting into. When you look at the story and you see, like,
Yeah.
oh, it's got some inappropriate stuff. Here's the exact inappropriate stuff that's there. You're like, okay, maybe no, thank you. Or you're like, here's all these specific characters. Oh, it's like a hurt comfort fiction where it's like, there's like all this sweet stuff. Or like, oh, it's like really wholesome, or oh, it's just whatever, or this is hardcore. There's a character death involved, and you're like, you know what you're getting into. And we don't have that at all in books. And I've also noticed sometimes I'll come across media too. I'm really into certain web comics and like translated like manga and manhwas and stuff like
Oh
that.
yes, my kid is reading all those.
You're kidding me. We have the same taste. Um,
Apparently. And like I said, I
apparently.
sent my kid the first book. So If he ever gets around to reading it, if he
Well,
tears himself
we
away
have
from the fan fiction, I'll let you
exactly.
know.
If he tears himself away from the fan fiction and reads it, definitely let me know because
Yeah,
apparently we have the same taste. He might
yeah.
dig it. But I also notice that when sometimes when we do see like just blanket trigger warnings or even when they say what it is, I kind of get frustrated because I'm like, well, now I can't read this, or I can
Uh,
skip this chapter or whatever, but I don't know what happened,
yeah,
and it might still influence the rest of the. And so there have been times when I kind of have read something through anyway and been like, idiot, why did I do that? And it's like because I still wanted to engage with the media, and my options were
yes.
either don't read it and no longer be part of this, no longer be part of this story, or do read it and risk the trigger. So something I started doing, first of all, Queen of Magic has content warnings at the beginning. You may remember them.
Yeah, I
It's like
think so.
very basic because Queen of Magic isn't too graphic,
No,
especially for
it's
a
not too
fantasy
bad.
novel.
Yeah, it's not
No.
too bad at all, which was part of what I liked about it, I think.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It
It
had
never
just
gets
enough, just enough so that you know what's happening, kind of backstory, but not enough to be like, okay, crazy raider lady.
I know, yeah, you're not like going, what the fuck is wrong with this person? You're like, oh, shit got real, shit got real. Somebody's
Right?
getting
Exactly.
shanked. You're like,
Yeah,
oh no.
yeah.
Um, and it's not intended, it's all intended to be to very much part of the narrative. There's nobody getting assaulted just for fucking kicks. Or just to
No,
be like, oh,
exactly.
historical accuracy. It's like, no, there's dragons. Fuck your accuracy.
Oh,
Um
dragons are the best, right?
Dragons are the best. Yes. Um but in book two, I like I told you, I start dealing with more mental illness. And when I mentioned like there's a character that has like dealt with some sexual abuse in the past, I don't even think that's actually explicitly come up or implicitly come up at all yet. But even with some of the things that do happen, there's a couple of I think there's maybe only two chapters where some more intense stuff happens or where people are like really kind of going through it. So I have the general content warning, of course, at the beginning that's
Hmm.
updated for this novel. But then when it comes to one or two of those chapters where I feel like, hey, something a little extra intense is happening,
Yeah.
I have a separate, like, there's a page that comes before it that's its own trigger warning. And then at the end of the chapter, there's a chapter summary where it says,
Oh,
this is what
that's neat.
happened
So
in this chapter.
I've read other books that will have that trigger warning, but I have not seen one that does a summary at the end,
Yeah, because that
right?
way I'm
That
like,
is interesting.
I want people to still, for example, I talked about the character that there's a moment where a character is like really reflecting on themselves and like it's like the most prosy I get. And even then it's not much, but they're really reflecting on a lot of mental illness, like their original plan for suicide and like all these
Hmm.
different things. And that chapter is like warned because I'm like, hey, this person like really gets into some of their feelings about this.
Yeah.
And that might be more than someone's able to handle on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Plus, I would
But
say just based on the first book, if this
mm,
one goes deeper, then it wouldn't necessarily have been expected by what you read in the first book.
you might not have. You might have picked. It's one of those things where I think when you get there, you'll be like, oh.
True, but
But
I just
it's
feel
not
like when you go to
necessarily.
pick it
Yeah.
up, right? It's not something that you would. So having that warning is like,
Hmm.
hey, we're getting into stuff now. We're
Yeah.
getting into the story, guys.
There's some shit. There's some things that happen. And then I think the second one is like there's a bit of kind of intense violence. So I'm
Oh,
like,
okay.
you know what? I'm gonna put this here, and then at the end I'm gonna put a summary because if someone's like, not today, Hayden, like I'm not doing it, they can just go, and it even says go to the end of the chapter. They can read the summary, and it says minimally like it's very like this is what happened. This person reflects on this. They feel that like they make this or they have this revelation or they do whatever, we move forward. Then
Yeah,
they can still continue with the narrative and they don't
yeah,
have to feel like kicked out or almost like ultimatum, like you have to deal with this or you have to kind of be like, I don't know what happened in this chapter.
yeah.
And maybe I don't
That
want to
is,
read it
I
all.
like that. That's so
I do
respectful to your
too.
audience. I've never heard somebody do that.
I've
Um,
never either. I hope people steal it.
I hope so too.
I hope people steal
If I
it.
ever write a book like that, I will steal it.
Steal it. Steal it. It's not I don't own it. Everybody should do it. I would love to see that be a thing. I think
Mhm.
especially in like the book community cuz you really pick up a book and you don't know what is in there. And that's
Right.
scary in today's world.
And
Like
there is a lot more um trigger warnings being used nowadays. People are being much more respectful of others'
yes.
ability to cope with certain horribleness, I guess.
Yeah.
Um because even like we're talking about TikToks before, people will put a trigger warning in their little description. So
Mm-hmm.
before the video even starts, you can see it usually in capital letters, TW, trigger warning. And it's like,
Yeah.
I'm a scroll. Even though I normally
I'm gonna
watch
keep
this
going.
person, I'm a scroll.
I
So
know that this is too much. Yeah.
exactly. So it's becoming more and more common to have those trigger warnings within the social media world, within the book world. And I know there was in one of the Facebook groups that I'm a part of with the writers, there was this debate that somebody had asked, I put a trigger warning at the beginning of my book, but I feel like there's a couple chapters that I maybe want to put another one because this specific chapter. And there was
Mm-hmm.
this debate going around, and I can't say for certain, but I think it was older writers and newer writers kind of having this argument, this debate. And everybody was very respectful, and I didn't see any like, oh, your idea is stupid. But because it goes back to what you were saying before, where, a few decades ago, there wasn't a lot of competition. There wasn't, we didn't have all of these things that we talked about or these platforms to use. And
Mm-hmm.
so there was that debate of, you know what, if it's at the beginning of your book, then leave it. You don't even have to put it at the beginning of your book if you don't want to, which is true. You don't have to.
You don't have to do anything.
No, exactly. And so
Technically.
exactly. So everybody had very valid points, but what it comes down to is what are you most comfortable doing and saying to your audience? How
Mm-hmm.
would you feel if you picked this book up thinking it was one thing and then finding out it's kind of something different?
I also think about like obviously my books are more new adult, but they're accessible to teens if they can,
I would
vibe
definitely
with it.
say so. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, there are some like teen characters,
Yeah.
and I think there's a lot of relatability and within that. So it's definitely not adult only. I categorize it more new adult because it's definitely not YA in my opinion, but
Hmm.
people could miss kind of who cares. But I just imagine like yeah, I could sit at any point in the day and be like, well, I don't think it's necessary to do this type of trigger warning, or I don't think
Yeah.
it's necessary to include this, or I don't know. But I just imagine like, what if there was some fucking kid who picked up my book and read it and it like destroyed their week? Like, what if they
Right.
couldn't sleep that night because I set off something in them? Like, that's unacceptable to me. Like, that like
Yeah.
upsets me so deeply that I'm
Exactly.
like,
It's what
I'll
can
put
you live with?
whatever I have to put. Yeah, what can I live with? And so I'm like, I have my general warning at the beginning with the specifics, and I break down like references versus depictions so people know exactly what to
Oh,
expect.
that's interesting.
Yeah, references being more of like, oh, this thing happened, and depictions being more, I am describing the thing, right?
Oh,
So
okay.
and sometimes it also kind of notes like, oh, sometimes there are depictions of like PTSD, so there will be flashbacks, but not a full rundown of the event.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
people understand, like, ideally, if somebody's like, oh, I know I'm a sensitive person in this area, they
Yeah.
can go through that and know exactly what to expect. And then there's a couple where I'm like, I'll put a special little thing, and I feel like that's plenty. That at that point, if
Hmm.
something happened, and I'm open to feedback. I think I even have a little thing that's like, please contact me if you think there's something I
Yeah.
missed. Because maybe I don't know.
Right? You don't know what you don't know until somebody tells
Yeah,
you, right? But I
exactly.
think what you did is much more than what a lot of people do. Like I said, I've never seen somebody do the summary, which I think is excellent, especially if you're going to give that trigger warning at the beginning of the chapter. Because I
Hmm.
always I always felt that the trigger warning at the beginning of the chapter, on top of the trigger warning at the beginning of the book, was a little redundant, unless, like you said, because you put the summary at the end. So it's not redundant. It's, hey, this is where you can skip if you need to. You're
Hmm.
not going to lose out. But before I'm like, hey, well, like you said, I'm just going to lose
You're
out
like,
on
I
this
know.
chapter. I just,
I you're like,
what's,
I get it. Like, what makes this chapter different? And it's that thing too where people can go to the summary, read the summary, and be like, oh, I'm okay with this actually. Like, obviously, the
yeah.
trigger warning at the beginning of the chapter is like, this is what goes on here. But if they're like, oh,
Mhm.
now that I actually look at it, I'm like, this is fine. You know,
Exactly.
it's okay that there's violence against this motherfucker. I hate them. I can go in and
Right?
read it.
Exactly. Oh, he's
You
going
know?
down.
Yes. Fuck yeah, actually. I want to read. They can make that decision for themselves. And I think that's too, like, the empowering readers to be like, I want you to be able to read this book, but like
Exactly.
your well-being is more important than you reading this book. But I also
Right.
want you to be able to make that choice. So I'm going to give you this information. And worst case scenario, maybe some people still think it's a little redundant. I don't care uh, about that. Like
Exactly. It's
that's one of
what
the
can you
opinions. I'm like,
live with?
whatever. Exactly. And like I said, I would not be cool with myself. I would not be, I would be very upset and disappointed with myself if I left those things out and it resulted in someone being like legitimately hurt. And that's something I think about too with writing is obviously I'm a very like I'm a very small time author, but I still think about things like impact and what kind of messages am I sending, and like I try to include a lot of different identities and diversity. Queen of Magic is when the series starts to get more queer, which is really exciting for me. I am queer, but when I first started writing it, I didn't know that. So I was very
Oh.
nervous writing like my first like gay character being like, "Don't fuck it up." It's fine.
Oh, that's funny. So you would super get along with my kid even more because he's trans. So there you
Yeah.
go. Well,
We would
maybe
get
one
along.
day you guys have got to talk.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Um we have exactly the same taste, and we're both part of the LGBTQ community.
That's funny.
Uh but yeah, I think about the impact of my work theoretically because I would like to be successful. I'd like to be
Oh,
sustainable, and how important it is that I don't do harm. Goals.
yes.
Don't hurt people.
I like
Uh,
that. Um, so what is a piece of advice, piece of unsolicited
yeah.
advice that
Yes.
I love giving the unsolicited stuff here.
I'm good at
Um,
that.
that you would give to somebody who is picking up a book that does have a trigger warning, whether it's your book, a different book, whatever, it has a trigger warning. What's your piece of advice to them if they're like, um,
If you look at it and it's not an obvious, like, oh, these are fine, if there's anything in you that goes, put it down for a minute and like actually think about it. Come back to it in 5 minutes. I don't care. Because in that moment, you're more likely to go, I'll be fine, when you're not going to be fine. So put it down for 1 minute if you have to and be like, am I actually going to be okay? Is it actually worth it? And luckily with my book, you can just read the chapter summary if it's
right?
really bad. You
Exactly.
know, you can just go read the chapter summary and be like, okay, whatever. Maybe I can go back and read it. Or maybe today's just not the day to read it. Maybe I'll be able to better place another day. Like, I don't know your life.
And
But
that's a
yeah,
really good
put
point
it
too,
down.
actually, is the
Hmm.
one day might be worse because maybe you're having a really bad day to begin with.
Hmm.
And then a different day, you're like, okay, I'm capable. I'm good. I'm strong today.
Yeah, yeah. 1 minute you're like, I want to read the book about the badass witch. And then you're like, oh no, somebody's sad? I don't want that right now. I'd like to just skip over that and go back to some badassery, please. Thank you. Like, I got you.
Exactly.
I got you
Exactly.
covered.
That's what I like about it, where it's like, oh, I'm queen. Okay.
It gets worse for her. Chapter one, honestly, and I can guarantee I will be offering little sneak peeks and stuff. I already did to my email list. I just sent them. You should really check out authorhaydenknight.com, y'all, if you're interested at all. Join my little email list now. I'm sending out things regularly leading up to release, though normally I don't because I hate social media and marketing, so don't worry about
And yet you have to
it.
do it as an author.
I have to do it, and it's so miserable. But yeah, I sent out sneak peeks and stuff. But even chapter one, like I'm very proud of the increase in like my writing quality from book one to book two. It's like noticeable, I think, right away.
Yeah, I feel
The
like that's
stakes have changed.
everything you do more and more you get better at.
Exactly. It's not that surprising, but I feel like somewhere between book one and book two, and then like the 10 year of like working on
Well, yeah,
narrative,
it's a pretty
whatever.
big gap.
It was a pretty big, and obviously, like I did a lot of rewriting book one over time, but going into book two, I feel like I found much more of what will probably be more of a long term voice and writing style and whatnot.
Mhm.
Because I've done a lot of work on book three. I finished like the A story of
Oh,
book
okay.
three. And so there's still like a lot of similarity in like the writing style, but from book one to two it increases like so dramatically. I'm actually really proud of it, and the story changes. Shit's gotten real. One of the little taglines is like the revolution was the easy part, and so we see
Oh,
that with our protagonist Solaire, who was never like, I want to be the queen of magic. She was like, I hate this, but I
yeah.
don't have a lot of options. And in book two, she's like, oh, turns out I really like don't know what to do. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, also realizing that there's a difference between leaders who are good in catastrophe
Mm.
moments and leaders who are good at sustaining. And she realizes very quickly that she is the former. Like, she is not like somebody who can sustain and like maintain a country very easily. She's better at dealing with world ending things. So she has a bit of the
Mm.
guilt as things start to get really crazy in Queen of Madness, where she actually is like almost happier and like has better mental health because she feels less pressure because there's a bigger problem to deal with. And she's like, oh,
Ah.
she feels guilty about it. Like, obviously she doesn't want it to have happened, but it's that idea of like, rather than having to deal with like the day to day of trying to continue building this country and like running things and dealing with political shit and some people being
Ugh.
annoying
Yeah.
and like all this crap that's like just not her thing. Oh, okay, there's like a big catastrophe. I gotta go deal with
I gotta
that. Oh
I'll just be right
no.
back.
Yeah, call me later. Somebody else can do it. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
she hates it. Which is then funny because one of the other point of view characters who's technically new had a little sneak peek in book one. It's the tiniest little peek, isn't even mentioned by name, but she's there, who comes back in book two and is a point of view character, loves all that shit. Like, she's super into politics and stuff, so it's
Ah.
kind of opposite energy. But it's very exciting. Point of view characters include that character who's unnamed. It includes Bar, who's one of the werewolf twins, who's one of my favorite characters ever. Um, he's just the best and he can do no wrong in my eyes. The rest of them are on thin ice. And then the human princess, who's technically the protagonist's half sister, not that that really
Oh
matters.
yes.
We get to see a little bit through her perspective how the human country is just fucked at this point, falling apart, shit's real. And we get a little bit more insight into that, not in the like, oh, aren't the villains from book one sad? Like, no, they're sad, but like they deserve it.
Right. Oh, they so do. They so do.
They did it to themselves, but
They
here's some
yeah.
fun context. So now you know why they did it to themselves. And
Which
I love
that's what I'm interested in. That's
yeah,
very much. Yep, yep.
I'm interested in the whole like downfall narrative, but I don't want to be made to feel. I don't do that a lot. I don't like sympathize with villains. I hate that. I'm like, whatever.
Yeah.
Here's what made them complex or human. They still suck. Like, they're still bastards.
Right? Yeah, exactly. You can have something bad happen to you, but it doesn't mean I have to feel bad for you.
Exactly. Like,
Yeah. All right. So where do people, so October 24th,
October 24th.
where do people get a hold of it?
It's going to be on Amazon, probably just Amazon for the foreseeable future because I'm doing my best. You can check me out. I am author Hayden Knight on Instagram, and I have a YouTube now.
Look
I only
at
have one video there right now where I was kind of doing, I don't know, I'm playing with it.
that. Okay,
I'm
okay.
playing with it. Where I'm kind of trying to play with, I don't know, just some different things to see. Right now, there's only the one video talking a little bit about like the concept, like the chapter one, and talking a little bit about it in Queen of Magic. So I want to do more stuff talking a little bit about the process and the behind the scenes of writing a little bit. More
Cool.
about like the philosophy and some of the characters and getting into that with book one and two as we get up there. Hopefully, I can continue doing that. Maybe I'll do some other silly things too. I don't know. But author Hayden Knight on both of those platforms, and then authorhaydenknight.com for my site, where you can still read part one of Queen of Magic for free. You can still
Oh,
read the whole part one, which you may remember is not one chapter. It's like a bunch of chapters.
yeah.
You can still read that for free. It's back up on my site. It's very obvious. So check that out if anyone's interested, which you should be. It's good. So
Right. And then you're prepared for when book two comes out.
yeah, you got to be prepared for book two.
Yeah.
You don't want to be left out.
No, you definitely don't. It's good, guys. Go read my, if you have any doubts, go and read my review.
Yeah, it was really good. I was like, oh my God.
I enjoyed it. It was a good book. I had no lies.
I'm glad. I'm
Or
glad.
else
Yeah.
or else I would have been like, oh, your second one. Cheryl.
Yeah, I know. You would have been like, okay, I guess. Yeah, trying to read between the lines of like people's like reviews to be like, did they actually enjoy it or are they just pissed? I remember once forever ago I got a review. I think it's like gone now because of a re-release thing where someone was kind of critical of Queen of Magic, but then at the end they were like, I'll probably read the set like anymore though if they come out. And I was like, I've won! I've won! I've won!
That's hilarious. Yeah. No.
Yes. Valid criticisms, but you're gonna read the next one and that's a win.
Right? That's all that matters because you're not going to please everybody 100% of the time.
No, I can't.
So it's all good. All right. So thank you so much, Hayden, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having
again.
me. I love being here.
And I look forward to reading part 2. And when part 3 comes out, hook me up.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I'll be back.
Obviously.
I'll be back. Hopefully the less time, but maybe not. We'll see.
It's all good.
All right.
As always, thank you so much for the amazing guests that we have on the show. Be sure to check out their links down in the description below. If you want to support the channel, go ahead and check out our merch store. We've got some very cool things on there. That's my favorite. Sorry, I'm busy ending the stigma. But there's some other very cool designs. 10% of the proceeds always goes back to the Canadian Mental Health Association. Be sure to follow us on Facebook at RB Media because we have some great new shows coming up and you never want to miss any of those episodes. And remember, the only way to end the stigma of mental health is to speak openly and honestly. Bye!